Good day class and welcome to our lecture on listening. I would like to open with a brief quote from G.K. Chesterton, who once stated, "There's a lot of difference between listening and hearing." Today, given our constant connections to technology and the overall way of life, many people do not know the difference between the two. So, what we will cover in this lecture are the differences between listening and hearing. We will then cover ethical listening, poor listening, and we will end this lecture with some practical ways in becoming a better listener. But to begin, let us first define the difference between hearing and listening. The technical definition for hearing is the vibration of sound waves on the eardrums and the firing of electrochemical impulses in the brain. Hearing does not tend to take much effort, it tends to be a passive practice and is usually unintentional. Listening on the other hand involves hearing, but it is a concerted effort to pay attention to what is heard and make sense of it. So, it goes beyond just taking in sounds, it involves thinking and organizing in order to comprehend. It generally takes discipline to become a good listener and try to do more than just hear. But if you are able to discipline yourself to be a good listener, this will aid you in comprehension, prevent confusion, and help you critique what you are listening to. The goal is to become an active listener. That is, someone who pays attention and has a positive attitude when taking in messages. The process of listening is most notably taught in what is referred to as the HURIER model. This is an acronym which stands for hearing, understanding, remembering, interpreting, evaluating, and responding. Let us go through each of these stages to gain a better understanding of how the listening process works. The first step is hearing. This means we simply are attending to the message being presented. The second stage is understanding, which is the transition from hearing to listening. Understanding is focused on comprehending the message and decoding it, giving it meaning. As we seek to understand the message being presented, we are also remembering what we are listening to, recalling information in the process. Next, we begin to interpret, paying attention to all variables and contexts, including the non-verbal messages coming for the presenter. As we interpret, we then begin to evaluate the message, making judgments regarding the information. And lastly, we respond, either verbally or non-verbally. During a speech presentation, the audience members are generally all going through this same process. Now that we understand the basic model of listening, let us cover a brief understanding of the taxonomy of listening, or the types of listening. There are several types of listening, but for this class we are focused on what is called critical listening. This is defined as listening for the purpose of analyzing a message to either accept or object to it. This is not passive, but is very systematic in its approach because it involves summarizing information, recalling facts, distinguishing main points, separating facts from opinions, spotting weaknesses in the content, and judging the soundness of the evidence. Connected to this form of listening is what we call discriminative listening. This is listening for the purpose of filtering out information and deciding specifically what you want to listen to and what you do not want to listen to. Another term for this would be selectively hearing, where you are purposely choosing what you want to listen to and what you want to ignore. Next, we have what is called comprehensive listening. This form of listening is focused on understanding information you recall, but is done during the discriminative listening process. In other words, the listener chooses the portion they want to listen to and then focuses on comprehending that specific portion. Therapeutic listening is another form of listening in which one acts as a sort of sounding board for another. This is often observed when providing emotional support, counseling, or friendships. And lastly, there is appreciative listening. This is listening for pleasure or enjoyment, usually through music and entertainment. Now that we have covered a basic understanding of hearing and listening, let's briefly go over ethical listening. Many of you will experience speeches and presentations that either do not interest you, or that you may find in opposition to your view. It is important to make a practice of disciplining yourself to listen, even when you do not feel like it or you may disagree with the subject. Keep in mind that you would appreciate it if your audience made the effort to listen to you, so you should have the courtesy of doing likewise. When we speak about ethical listening, one of the main things we are communicating is the practice of being courteous and attentive. It is important that you be civil, respectful, and aware of your feedback so as not to be disrespectful. You also want to refrain from prejudging the speaker or the message, but instead make efforts to strive and understand both the speaker and the message, reserving your judgments till the speech is complete. This goes for both negative and positive judgments. And lastly, when it comes to ethical listening, it is imperative you maintain the idea of the free and open expression of ideas. You can disagree with a message and still support the right for one to express their views. Moving on to your next main point, we will cover some of the basic causes for poor listening skills. Though there may be a plethora of reasons, we will cover some of the more common ones regarding public presentations. First, it is simply just not concentrating. We hear the message, but we never quite transition into listening to what is being said, therefore not concentrating. We tend to interrupt our listening by thinking about other things or letting our minds wander, which is one of the reasons we mentioned that listening takes discipline. Another cause for poor listening is actually the opposite of the first cause, that is, sometimes we can listen too hard. This can be observed when you are paying particular attention to a specific portion of the speech, while ignoring the rest, therefore blocking out the main message for a portion of it. It could be that something may catch your attention, be shocking, humorous, or you may be purposely listening for something in expectation. There is also the tendency for listeners to jump to conclusions, which can cause poor listening. This often happens when one judges the speaker or message prematurely, and often results with the listener putting words in the mouth of the speaker as they expect or want to hear it. Next, we can also focus too much on the delivery style or personal appearance of the speaker. There may be times when the speaker may have something in their appearance which may be distracting, or perhaps something in their mannerisms will cause us to pay attention more to them than the speech. Another cause is one quite common, especially when it comes to persuasive speeches, and that is we let our emotional reactions overrun us. We can get so worked up emotionally that we not only judge the speaker or message, we block out anything else they are presenting. There is also noise which may distract us from hearing, either physically within or without the environment, or perhaps even physiologically or psychologically. For example, if we are trying to listen but we are hungry. Or perhaps we are in a bad mood or feeling excited about something else. And lastly, it may be that we simply just lack the capacity to take in the amount of information or the content. Generally speaking, most people have about a 20-minute listening capacity before they begin to zone out or get bored. So if you are listening to a line of speeches, it may be that you have reached your capacity. Sometimes the subject matter may be too overwhelming as well. If this is the case, the listener may lose focus once they begin to feel overwhelmed. And there are plenty of other reasons we can observe for poor listening, but this short list will suffice. But now that we have gone over the causes of poor listening, let us observe some practical ways of becoming a better, ethical listener, as well as how the speaker can help the audience listen better. First, make it a point to take listening seriously and discipline yourself to practice it. Make it a point to avoid mental and physical distractions during a presentation by identifying and resisting those distractions. Do not try to recall everything said, do not reject the message or the speaker by prejudging them, and do not jump to conclusions. Make a concerted effort to actually listen to what is being presented. Next, work on being an active listener, giving your undivided attention to the speaker in a genuine effort to understand what their point of view is. Be prepared and put away any electronics which will divert your active mindset, and try to mentally review the main points of the speech. Listen to the evidence which is being presented, noting if it is accurate, relevant or sufficient for the topic. Lastly, as the speaker, you should always practice what is called planned redundancy in order to help the audience listen. Planned redundancy is the repetition of your main points to aid the audience in understanding what they should be listening for. For this course, we make use of this practice by communicating the main points of your speeches 3 times in your presentation. In your introduction, you are to preview your main points. In the speech, you are to declare your main points after transitioning between them. And in your conclusion, you are to review your main points. In this way, one of the first things your audience hears and listens for are the previewed main points. They then listen for an explanation of those main points during the presentation. And one of the last things they hear is the review of those main points in your conclusion. Remember folks, listening is as much of a skill as your delivery method. It takes discipline and practice to become skilled in it. Make it your goal to find ways and challenge yourself to better your listening skills, making use of practical ways to improve. As we close this lecture, keep in mind that there is a difference between hearing and actually listening, that we are to focus on ethically listening to the presenters, understanding the basic causes of poor listening, and working on ways to become better listeners.